Hello everyone and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. In a small forgotten town swallowed by forest, the air was thick with a sense of dread that always lingered just out of sight. Margaret had always felt it, like a physical weight pressing down on her chest, but it had become unbearable after the last autumn storm rattled her ancestral home. It twisted the trees outside her window into grotesque shapes, and the howl of wind that followed sounded distinctly like whispers. Every night, she found herself unable to sleep, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, half expecting something to emerge from them. It felt as if the house was breathing around her, alive and aware, just waiting for her to let her guard down. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the Millstone Forest, where strange lights flickered at night and shadows shifted under the boughs. Margaret, raised on tales of the forest's haunted history, had scoffed as a child, but now, with her life spiraling after her father's death, curiosity gnawed at her. She often wandered to its edge, drawn by a force she couldn't name. Though the townspeople warned her to stay away, their fear only fueled her desperation to understand the darkness that had seemed to take root in her very bones. One late afternoon, with a heavy mist rolling in from the treetops, she stepped into the forest, her heart racing with anticipation and unease. The canopy above blocked the waning sunlight, plunging her into twilight. The air turned colder, sharper, and every crunch of twigs underfoot echoed like a warning. As she ventured deeper, the forest felt alive, vibrant yet sinister. The trees stood like twisted sentinels, their gnarled roots clawing at the earth, and the smell of damp earth mingled with something metallic, like blood. Margaret's resolve began to falter as the sounds around her shifted. The forest grew quiet save for a low, humming drone that pulsed through the air, almost musical. She stumbled upon a clearing where the grass was unnaturally vibrant, the green shimmering with a sheen that felt otherworldly. In the center stood a stone altar, its surface etched with symbols she could not decipher, and radiating a faint, eerie glow. It urged her closer, a call she couldn't resist. Kneeling, she caressed the cold stone and felt a shiver ripple through her spine. As she traced her fingers over the inscriptions, a flood of memories crashed over her. Glimpses of her childhood, afternoons spent in the woods, her father's, laughter echoing like a distant chime. But interspersed with those memories were flashes of darker times, shadows creeping around the edges of her mind, whispers of things seen out of the corner of her eye. She pushed those thoughts away, unwilling to confront the darkness that had slipped into her heart since her father's death. Yet the forest had other plans. With the sinking sun came shadows that danced at the periphery, darker and more menacing. Margaret's breath quickened, the air around her heavy with an unbearable silence. A movement caught her eye. A fleeting figure darted between the trees, too quick to fully discern but lingering just long enough to plant the seed of fear. She stood abruptly, heart pounding, and turned to leave. But the forest felt different now, as if it had shifted, rearranging itself to trap her. The path she traced only minutes before now appeared completely foreign, overgrown, and twisted. In panic, she rushed deeper into the woods, branches snagging her clothes, tearing at her skin. The air thickened, suffocating her as the drone grew louder, a cacophony of voices whispering in a tongue she didn't understand. With every frantic step, she could feel something shadowing her, a presence that grew heavier with each passing moment. It whispered secrets that dripped like poison into her mind, eroding her will, making her question her own sanity. Just when hope flickered in her chest, a faint light broke through the trees. An opening? A way out? She stumbled towards it, heart racing, but as she emerged into the clearing, horror clawed at her soul. It wasn't an escape, it was a graveyard of twisted figures, polished bones arranged in beautiful, grotesque patterns, each luminously lit by an otherworldly glow. They moaned softly, their emptiness echoing through the ether, the longing palpable. She fell to her knees, paralyzed by a suffocating revelation. These were the lost souls of the forest, ensnared by an ancient hunger. Margaret's own voice trembled in her throat, begging for release, but something deeper, a primal part of her, began to resonate with the call of the forest, urging her to join the lost, embracing the darkness that her father had fought to keep at bay. The sky darkened, swirling with ominous clouds, the air thick with foreboding like the breath of something long dormant stirring to life. The very ground trembled beneath her feet, stirring a dizzying mix of fear and a dark eagerness she couldn't resist. In those final moments, she understood the true horror of the forest. It wasn't merely a place of darkness, it was a hunger, feeding on the souls of the weary and lost, and she was as much a part of it as the twisted trees and the wailing shadows. The figures around her began to shift, transforming into reflections of herself, each one an echo of a fear she had carried, the guilt of her father's death, the pain of isolation. They beckoned her closer, whispering promises woven from her own memories. As she crossed the threshold from living to lost, the world outside faded away and the hunger became her own, wrapping around her like a cloak. In that moment, Margaret became a guardian of the forest, a part of its ceaseless cycle of despair and allure, forever entwined in the shadows that whispered and beckoned to those who dared to tread too close. The whispers of her own voice faded into the wind, replaced by a chorus of laughter, a twisted serenade, a reminder that some legacies, like the forest itself, are meant to consume rather than protect. Underneath the pallid glow of a dying moon, the town of Thistlewood lay shrouded in an oppressive silence. The air was thick with the scent of decay, as if the very soil had swallowed the dreams of its inhabitants. Hannah, an urban photographer, seeking solace after her messy divorce, had embraced the eerie allure of this forgotten place. The old Victorian that loomed at the edge of town had captured her imagination. Its dilapidated frame whispered secrets to those brave enough to listen. As she climbed the overgrown steps, a shiver ran down her spine, yet it sparked a strange giddiness in her chest. This was the thrill of discovery, a feeling she had almost forgotten. Inside, the grandeur of the past clashed horrifyingly with the grotesque decay that surrounded her. Paint peeled like dead skin from the walls, and dust swirled in the air, dancing in the filtered light that cracked through shuttered windows. As she moved from room to room, her camera capturing the morbid beauty of forgotten relics, a cracked mirror, an ornate clock frozen in time, the sensation of being watched gnawed at her. Was it the echo of her own thoughts, or something more sinister? The stillness felt alive, as if the very walls were leaning in, straining to reveal what lay nestled in their shadows. Her exploration led her to a room that seemed untouched by time. The air was cooler here, and the chilled silence thrummed with an undercurrent of anticipation. It was adorned with a heavy velvet drape, the color of dried blood. As she pulled it aside, a musty smell assaulted her. It was a collection of family portraits, their eyes piercing through the years with an unsettling intensity. One painting in particular drew her in, the matriarch of the household, all sharp cheekbones and vacant gaze. Hannah felt a knot in her stomach. Something about that gaze felt like a tether, binding her to the very essence of this house, this town, and the stories that had suffocated within it. Night draped itself over Thistlewood, wrapping the house in darkness, until the only sound was the distant howling of the wind. As the clock struck midnight, Hannah's unease burgeoned into a tempest of fear and urgency. Each creak of the floorboard sounded like a morose reminder that she was not alone. She decided to channel her rising panic through her camera, capturing the haunting ambiance, each shutter click now echoing like the ticking of a countdown. The light flashed intermittently, illuminating fleeting glimpses of shadows darting away, always just out of reach, teasing her with their presence. Compelled by curiosity and dread, Hannah ventured into the cellar, a place heavy with darkness and soaked in the smell of rot. The steep steps were slick with dampness, a deceptive lead into terror. Here the air was thick. Using her camera flash, she illuminated the cramped space, revealing remnants of old furniture stacked haphazardly in the corners. But her breath hitched when she spotted something else. A frayed doll lay abandoned amidst the debris, its glassy eyes reflecting the light. As she stepped closer, the sudden scent of lavender enveloped her, sweet and sickly, a stark contrast to the decay. In that moment, her instincts screamed for her to flee, but the pull of the doll was magnetic. She reached out, fingers grazing its fabric, but just as she did, the noise of scurrying filled the darkness. Panic soared through her veins like fire, and she stumbled back, dropping her camera in her haste. In the flash of the falling device, she glimpsed a flicker, a figure standing in the shadows, blurry and undefined. Heart pounding, Hannah backed away but stumbled over the threshold into the hallway, a hateful whisper skimming her ear. The air grew colder, each breath a visible fog against the night. Memories of the portraits flooded her mind, their hollow eyes fixated on her. She raced through the labyrinth of rooms, past the living rooms filled with remnants of family gatherings, the dining table still set with a phantom meal, decay replaced by an unsettling nostalgia. Time slipped between her fingers, even as she felt the unseen figure stalking her, its presence an amalgam of malice and sorrow. The stairs creaked beneath her weight as she fled to the upper floors, desperation lending speed to her feet. The wall seemed to pulse with menace, and her skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes boring into her. In a final, frantic bid for refuge, she pushed open a door and collapsed into an attic, its air heavy with despair. Rummaging through old trunks, she unearthed letters yellowed with age, detailing a family's downfall, each line dripping with grief and guilt. One letter spoke of the matriarch's madness, a hunger that turned her against her own, until she was but a specter of resentment thriving in the chaos she cultivated. And then she heard it, a soft sobbing reverberating around her. The sound was almost intimate, the whimpering of someone suffering, lost in anguish. Gathering her courage, Hannah stepped towards the source. In the far corner, draped in shadow, she saw a figure hunched over, a fractured silhouette against the wall. It was the matriarch from the portrait, her face twisted in grief, her presence a void that yearned to consume joy and hope. Before Hannah could react, the figure turned, revealing eyes that burned with fury and despair, an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. In a moment of sheer panic, Hannah tried to retreat, but the door slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate. The energy in the attic shifted, darkening dangerously, entwined with the suffocating intensity of the matriarch's sorrow. With a rush of air that felt like suffocation, the whispers crescendoed, a cacophony of lost souls drowning out her thoughts. Hannah pressed against the cold wooden walls, desperate for escape, as she was swallowed whole by the shadows, pulled into a suffocating embrace that promised oblivion. The next morning, townsfolk found the house even quieter than before. The shuttered windows seemed to pulse with a peculiar stillness, as if they guarded a secret. As the sun rose, illuminating the dust mote swirling in the air, a new family moved into the Victorian, oblivious to the horror that seeped through its cracked walls. But on quiet nights, when the moon hung high and the wind howled mournfully, they might catch a glimpse of a fleeting figure in the attic, a sorrowful wail echoing through the halls, reminding them that some pasts refuse to remain buried. High above the crumbling rooftops of a once thriving urban center, the sky brooded an ominous gray, pregnant with a storm that never broke. Amelia, an insomniac journalist, found herself wandering the deserted streets, her senses heightened by the disquiet that enveloped her. She had been chasing a lead about a series of disappearances that had gripped the city in recent weeks. The latest victim, a child, snatched from a playground where echoes of laughter now mingled with the ghostly whispers of the past. The air felt thick, almost viscous, as if something unseen was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Her journey began on a routine night shift, sparked by a lingering unease that buzzed beneath her skin. Flickering streetlights cast long shadows that stretched like skeletal fingers across the pavement, clutching at her heels. With every corner turned, her heart thudded against her ribs as abandoned buildings loomed like the hollowed eyes of a forgotten world. It felt as if the city itself was watching her, a silent jury weighing the truth against the suffocating darkness surrounding him. Amelia's investigation led her to the outskirts of the city, where twisted metal and shattered glass marked the site of a now closed mental institution, shrouded in urban legend. Locals whispered about its cruel past, about experiments conducted under the guise of healing, but the truth felt more sinister, twisting into shapes that danced just out of sight. Compelled by the urgency of her quest, she slipped through a jagged opening in the rusting fence, the air inside heavy with the scent of damp and decay. As she stepped into the heart of the institution, a chill crawled up her spine. The silence here was profound, broken only by the occasional scuttling of unseen creatures and the distant creaking of old wood, as if the very walls were groaning under the weight of memories long buried. The remnants of the past lay strewn across the floor, torn papers fluttering like lost souls in the breeze, rusted gurneys standing as mausoleums for forgotten lives. Each room she entered told a story, but it was the story of a child she sought. The air crackled with an electric foreboding as she pressed on. The deeper she ventured, the more the atmosphere constricted around her, squeezing out the light until shadows became living entities, whispering secrets only the walls could understand. As Amelia examined the peeling plaster and the faded crayon-like drawings that adorned the walls, a sudden movement caught her eye, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. Her breath shallowed, a sense of being watched prickled across her skin. Unsure if it was her mind playing tricks, she shook her head, determined to find the truth. That's when she discovered the basement, its door ajar, and an unnatural chill wafting from the darkness below. The air was thick with a sour stench, equal parts mold and something far less earthly. She hesitated, the instinct to flee battling against her insatiable curiosity. But the thought of the missing child propelled her forward, one cautious step after another until she stood at the top of the winding staircase. With each step down, the light above faded, swallowed by an all-consuming black. The dampness seeped into her clothes and her heartbeat pounded a furious rhythm. She reached the bottom, heart racing as she aimed her flashlight into the abyss. The beam caught an expanse of concrete, lined with doors that appeared to breathe, with a life of their own. One door stood slightly ajar, a whisper of a breeze sighing through the crack, inviting her into its maw. Pushing the door open, Amelia's light fell upon a room cluttered with twisted remnants of once organized chaos. Abandoned toys, rusting medical instruments, and yellowing pages of patient files, each a testament to a story left untold. In the corner, a small figure sat hunched, unmoving, a little girl clothed in tattered remnants of what must have been a bright dress, her eyes wide and glassy, reflecting nothing but darkness. Amelia's breath caught as she approached, an overwhelming sense of forlorn sorrow washing over her. The girl's lips barely parted, and what escaped them was a soft, haunting melody that echoed off the walls, seducing Amelia deeper into a nightmarish lullaby. But the moment of connection fractured when the girl's gaze shifted, locking onto something behind Amelia. An overwhelming presence swelled in the room, and the air turned electric, thick with dread. A rush of instinct propelled Amelia backward, but it was too late. The walls pulsated as if alive, and she could see them. Twisted faces emerging from the stone, mouths mimicking the girl's tune. Each face retained traces of humanity, yet their eyes burned with an ancient hunger, a desperation that clawed at her sanity. Panicked, she turned to flee, but the stairs dissolved into a slippery, monstrous surface, drawing her back into the abyss. The melody intensified, reverberating through her skull until it felt like her mind might rupture under its weight. The memories of the children, trapped and tortured, flooded back to her. Visions of their terror played out in a grotesque tapestry, woven together by the threads of sorrow and dread. She screamed, a sound lost in the cacophony of whispers as she was dragged down to join the Legion, to become another story left to decay within the institution's haunted halls. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain pummeling the earth as if trying to wash away the sins of the past. Days later, when the sun once again carved through the city's gloom, the search for Amelia would yield nothing but echoes, her name swallowed alongside the lost laughter of the deceased children. The institution remained, a sentient sentinel, harboring its secrets while the streets carried on just as they always had, utterly silent, save for the faintest whisper of a forgotten melody hanging in the stillness, urging the curious and the brave to look closer, to listen. The abandoned train station loomed like a forgotten ghost, its structure crumbling under decades of neglect. Black vines snaked around rusted skeletons of old machines, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and mildew. Avery had ignored the warnings about the place, the locals' hushed whispers trailing her like smoke. They spoke of those who entered but never returned, their stories weaving a fabric of eerie isolation that settled heavily in her gut as she stepped inside. The sound of her footsteps echoed dully, swallowed by the shadows, while an unseen presence seemed to watch from the corners of the vast empty space. As the afternoon sun slipped behind thick clouds, the light inside the station waned, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Avery's heart pounded, quickening as the air grew colder, pricking her skin with a chill that felt alive, almost sentient in its insistence. She wrapped her arms around herself, her fingers brushing against an old, frayed shawl that had once belonged to her grandmother. That same shawl she had worn on the last day they spent together, when she had spoken mysteries of loss and fear in a voice so soft it was easily lost to the wind. While searching for remnants of the past, an old ticket booth or faded advertisements, Avery felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. The silence thickened around her, prickling at her nerves, stirring memories of childhood tales about the station, rumors of strange lights flickering in the night, whispers echoing in the dark halls, as if the walls themselves were recounting lost stories. She shook her head, trying to clear the encroaching haze of unease. This was just an old building, she assured herself, her skepticism faltering as a soft creak startled her. Advancing deeper, she could hear the faintest sound of rustling behind her, a whisper of movement that sent a surge of adrenaline through her. The hollow breach of the walls appeared alive, the shadows shifting and swirling as if they were breathing. She spun around, only to find nothing. Darkness, coiling back. Like a guilty secret, breathing deeply she pressed on, the dull ache of anxiety weaving into her thoughts, giving rise to the doubt that perhaps the stories held a shred of truth. A flicker of light caught her eye. Instinctively, she moved toward it, drawn into what seemed a long-forgotten waiting room, the benches sagging like weary witnesses. At the center, an old lantern hung from the ceiling, its flame flickering disturbingly, and for a moment Avery felt a strange warmth emanating from it, a promise of safety amidst the creeping dread. But then the flame flickered, stretching long, fingers of light across the room illuminating scattered photographs, faces peering out, eyes wide and terrified. They were trapped, like moths captured in an eternal moment of horror. As she picked up one of the faded photographs, a shiver raced down her spine. The faces seemed to morph subtly under her gaze, twisting into grotesque expressions of anguish. Suddenly, a memory washed over her. Her grandmother standing in the same room, her eyes glazed with sorrow, muttering about broken promises and forgotten souls. Confusion filled Avery. Was she reliving the past or entangled in a web spun by time beyond her understanding? A noise, a muted thud, resonated from behind the wall, snapping her back. She could feel her breath quickening, panic tightening its grip around her chest. A ball of dread coiled in her stomach as she turned, scrutinizing the stark shadows cast by the uneven ceiling. Coughing out a tremor, she dared to approach the wall, pressing her palm against its cold, crumbling surface. The strangled silence seemed to pulse, the heartbeat of the station reverberating through her fingertips. Just outside the lantern's warmth, things began to shift, taking on a life of their own. She could hear soft laughter, childlike yet twisted, smearing the edges of her sanity. The laughter swirled, echoing her grandmother's voice in a warped symphony of the past. It was as if the very walls of the station conspired against her, urging her to uncover its buried secrets, but each step deeper pulled her further from reality. Shadows elongated and danced around her, forming unsettling shapes that felt both familiar and horrifying. Just then, scattered whispers turned to piercing shrieks, wrenching her from the clutches of the lantern's dim glow. Avery stumbled back, catching her breath as she sensed a rush of cold air wrapping around her, a damp chill seeping into her bones, paralyzing her with dread. The lantern flickered violently, casting a strobing light that revealed ghastly figures twisting in the shadows, their faces resembling those in the photographs, paralyzed in grotesque expressions of despair. The walls felt alive now. They trembled, vibrating with an ancient knowledge, whispering tales of the countless souls that had tread these grounds. Avery's mind swirled, panic rising as thoughts coalesced into terror. What if she was one of them? What if the stories were true and she had unknowingly walked into a cycle of horror? Determined to escape the madness, she sprinted for the exit, her heart pounding like a drum, a desperate rhythm against the symphony of howls surrounding her. But as she rounded the corner, the entrance she had entered was gone, replaced by an endless corridor, stretching deeper into the shadowed belly of the station. With each step deeper, the laughter taunted her like an echo of a long-forgotten lullaby, each note curdling in her gut. Fatigue draped over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Just when hope seemed to dim, she spotted a faint outline, the light of a door glinting tantalizingly. With renewed determination, she charged toward it, only to find it barred tight, invisible tongues of darkness licking at her heels, ensnaring her with an embrace colder than ice. As she roared against the inescapable pull of the station, a voice crawled through her mind, the reverberation echoing her grandmother's last unsettling words. Some doors should never be opened. In that moment, realization struck like lightning. The station thrived on the agony of those trapped within, feeding off their fear and regret. Avery felt the walls closing in, a suffocating web binding her to the horrors that lurked in the knotted corners. The wall trembled again, shifting into a gaping maw that whispered her name, a siren beckoning her ever closer. Her voice faltered, caught in her throat as shadows twisted into faces of despair, the lost souls irrevocably trapped. A scream tore from her lips, but it dissolved in the darkness, swallowed whole. Whether she lost hope or sanity mattered little now. The station claimed another soul, another story added to its haunted archives. Avery would become part of that whispered folklore, her image joining those photographs, her terror immortalized within the walls. And as the lantern flickered one last time, the laughter rose to a crescendo, binding the living with the dead, leaving a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, some doors eternally shut. The station sat, insatiable, waiting, once more, its hunger unquenched, ready to weave yet another entry into its dark and timeless grasp.